Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of Porous Media Tea Time Talks. Just like to mention, as you already know, our platform is to promote young researchers who are working on porous media related research. So we do this in collaboration with Geoscience and Geoenergy webinar series, which is hosted by Sebastian and Hardy. As you can see from our labels, my name is Kamaljeet Singh, and today in our studio we got Marcel Mora, Tom Bultrace, Mohammad Nuraipur, and our webinar series is growing. So is our team. So we got new members in our Porous Media Tea Time Talk team. Aryan Massini from Ghent University, Nara Bernardo, Federal University of Uberlandia. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. And we got our third member, new member, Xavier Santos from the University of Texas. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Navid Bizmark from Princeton University. He's got a fascinating profile. He earned his bachelor's degree from University of Tehran in Iran and his master's and PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Waterloo in Canada. In his graduate studies, he worked on the fundamental engineered applications of naturally derived nanoparticles in multiphase and porous systems. Currently, he's a PCCM postdoctoral research fellow at Princeton University studying the transport of colloids in porous media as well as fabricating green smart materials from structured colloids. So he was nominated for Governor General's Gold Medal and received a number of awards and scholarships, including Ontario Graduate Scholarship, the Royal Bank of Canada Water Scholarship, and the Waterloo Institute of Nanotechnology Fellowship, among others. So today he's going to talk about deposition and erosion of colloid particles in porous media. Thank you, Navid, for accepting our invitation, and thank you for joining us today. So floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your talk. And Navid, your mic, I think you're muted. All good.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kamal, for the introduction. And thanks to PMTTT organizers for inviting me to the studio. I'm Navid Bizmark, PCCM postdoctoral fellow, and here at Princeton. And today I'll be talking about the transport of colloids in porous media. This work has been mainly conducted at Professor Sujit Dattle's lab with Joanna Schneider, our PhD student, and in collaboration with Professor Priestley. Let's take a look at this beautiful ocean where we find microplastics in the sediments where they can be displaced by deep sea currents, but they're far away from seashores. Where do these microplastics come from in the first place? Perhaps from marine sources. Yeah, but that's only for 20%. 80% of microplastics come from land, from where we live in. We wonder why or how. Well, of many ways, they could be carried by water through soils and aquifers. And this is one of many examples where transport of colloids and nanoparticles in porous media is critical. But what we specifically are interested in knowing is how hydrodynamic forces and particle grain interactions control this transport process. To answer this question, we built a 3D model system by sintering silica beads in a quartz capillary. Using our expertise in matching refractive indices, we could formulate a carrier fluid to see through this porous medium to essentially reconstruct this medium in 3D to find out porosity, pore size distribution, and pore connectivity. So we have this porous medium. We inject amine functionalized polystyrene particles under constant inlet concentration and constant pressure drop. That makes flow to be laminar and makes advection to be dominant. But let's pause for a second. These particles are positively charged, and we introduce them to a medium made of negatively charged grains. The immediate expectation would be they should get stuck right at the entrance. However, surprisingly, we found that when the injection pressure is large enough, these particles deposit throughout the entire porous medium, forming an extended deposition profile. This fabulous extended deposition profile has never been seen before. But we're interested in knowing what controls this mechanism. Why does this happen? To answer this question, we took a closer look at this dynamic process at the pore scale. Since the advection is dominant and there is a strong electrostatic attraction between particles and the grains, particles are deposited on the upstream surface of grains, and they continue to deposit it as they continue to be injected, which is not surprising. That's what theory predicts. However, in some of the pores, these particles deposit, and deposit grows, but to some extent. Beyond that, they got eroded. And through these cycles of deposition, erosion, and redeposition, that macroscopic extended deposition that I showed you earlier is happening. When erosion cannot completely balance the deposition, as you can see here in these points showing the spontaneous erosion and deposition rates, a net deposition happens throughout the entire porous medium. Now here we hypothesize that porous scale erosion generates the extended macroscopic deposition. We quantify this hypothesis by analyzing hydrodynamic stresses, force, and torques that are applied on colloids in porous scale. You can find out the details of these analyses in our publication, but in short, we found that hydrodynamic stresses overcome the yield stress required to fluidize colloidal aggregates. All right, now then we asked, how can we control this deposition profile? I just showed you that the porous scale erosion generates that extended deposition profile. Therefore, we concluded that the relative contribution of erosion can be determined by the imposed pressure drop. In other words, if we inject these particles under a different injection pressure, we should get a different deposition profile. And that's what we did. We tried, we injected these particles under a different injection pressure, and we obtained quite drastically different deposition profile. Here at the bottom, you see that these particles are locally deposited close to the entrance of the medium. Here, in this case, hydrodynamic stresses and therefore erosion are suppressed and making the deposition to be dominant. Now, when erosion and deposition rates are calculated at small injection pressure, we find that these parameters are at least 1 order of magnitude larger than that at high injection pressure. Therefore, a larger fraction of particles are deposited over a short period of time, resulting in a localized deposition profile. So I showed you the effects of hydrodynamic forces on the deposition profiles. The next thing that we were interested in knowing was how particle-grain interactions control the transport process. To answer this question, instead of injecting amine functionalized polystyrene, we injected carboxyl functionalized polystyrene with negative charge, and we kept the other operating conditions the same. Now, again, similar to positively charged cases, when the injection pressure is large, we get an extended deposition profile, as you can see here in this video. But microscale or porous scale microscopy revealed quite a different deposition profiles. Here, in this case, since there is a strong repulsion between particles and grains, particles do not attach to the surface of the grains, but instead they are strained in small and tight porous space between grains. But regardless of this different in where they deposit, similar to positively charged particles, these particles also deposit monotonically in some pores as they continue to be injected. And in some other pores, they go through cycles of deposition, erosion, and redepositions. And this, once again, shows that hydrodynamic stresses can overcome the yield stress. Therefore, given our hypothesis, we should expect a localized deposition if we inject particles at a small injection pressure. And that's what we observed indeed. Here, particles are injected, negatively charged particles are injected at a small injection pressure, and we get a localized deposition profile. Now, these drastic different deposition profiles originates from the fact that flow cannot drive erosion as strongly as that at high injection pressure. Similar to positively charged cases, when erosion cannot balance the deposition, as you can see here in these points showing the spontaneous erosion and deposition rates, a net deposition happens in the porous medium. And for small injection pressure, these rates are at least 1 order of magnitude larger than that at large injection pressure. Therefore, a big fraction of particles are deposited in the porous medium over a shorter period of time, resulting in a localized deposition. So I showed you the effects of hydrodynamic forces and particle-grain interactions on the transport process. Now, the final question that I would like to discuss with you was how deposition now impact the fluid flow. To find that out, I just want discuss a little bit of physics behind this. So let's say we have this localized deposition profile where we can easily distinguish two separate regions. One that is close to the entrance of the medium, where most of the deposition is taking place, and a region which is pristine and it's further downstream. Let's simplify this to a cartoon, and for a given time, say TD, we can describe the pressure drop across this porous medium using Darcy's law. Here, KD is the permeability of the deposited region, and K0 is the permeability of the pristine region. We can also describe the pressure drop across the porous medium before any deposition, in other words, at time 0. So we have these two equations. Since we keep the pressure drop across the porous medium in our experiments constant, we can combine these two equations to get a master relation for the overall permeability. Here, I want to draw your attention to three main parameters. Flow rate, which we measure it during the course of particle injection. The length of deposition, which we measure it through confocal microscopy, and the permeability of the deposited region, which we estimated by modeling the pore space as a bundle of parallel capillary tubes. And here is what this model predicts. When the deposition is minimal, the overall permeability is minimal. And you can see that through these empty symbols. Here, these points are representing both carboxyl and amine functionalized polystyrene injected at different pressures and for different injection concentrations. On the other hand, on the right-hand side of this figure, when the deposition is predominant throughout the entire porous medium, the overall permeability has dropped quite significantly. So here today, I talked about two main factors, hydrodynamic forces and particle grain interactions that influence the transport of colloids in porous media at two different scales, porous scale and macro scale. There are a lot more to say, but in the interest of time, I stop here and I refer you to our publication, but I'll be glad to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Navid. That's very interesting. I welcome anyone to type in the questions now. I have one quick one. So you showed that the deposition happens mostly at the front of the particles, right? At the upstream part of it. So this is it's a ballistic. It's because of ballistic force, right? The inertia of the particle. Do you have any scenario in which you had the deposition downstream of the particles, so it's going around and then depositing downstream?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's something that I mentioned about the advection. So in our experiments, in all of our experiments, advection was dominant, and therefore we have more deposition on the upstream side of the grains. To find out deposition in the back or at the back side of the grains, we need to run these experiments at a very, very, very slow flow rates or pressure drops to have Pecla number of the order of 1. In our case, Pecla was like, I believe, of the order of 1,000. So yes, in principle, it is possible, but in practice, it takes, I believe, maybe weeks, if not months, because even in these fast experiments, it took several days to get the data.
I see.
I've got a quick question, Marcel. Can I go for that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Navid, first of all, for this great presentation.
Yeah.
I've got actually a naive question. I was wondering if you have nanoscale roughness instead of smooth particles. Would you see a different behavior in that case? Or have you done some experiment like that?
If you have nanoscale roughness, you're saying?
Roughness. If the particles, instead of smooth particles, if you make them rough or etch them or something like that.
Yeah. I do not have, that's a great question. I do not have experimental results on that, but I have simulations on that, which I didn't have time to discuss today. They are in the paper. But what I did was I considered some roughness on the surface of the particles. So I considered like a cluster of particles, and also roughness on the grains, and study the particle trajectory around the grains. and that has a positive impact on making particles more sticky to the grains. If you have more roughness, but it's a bit tricky because if you have a very rough, like if the roughness is so big, then the whole hydrodynamic breaks down. So what I'm saying is about, as you said, like nanoscale roughness.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another quick question if there is no other coming still.
Sure.
It might be not directly connected to what you showed, but perhaps you know how to answer. Like to me, when I saw the experimental setup with the news these days, it immediately makes me think of the structure of this FPP2 mask or N95 mask in the US, the mask that people are using all over to protect against COVID. Because one of the reasons why it's so effective at stopping you from breathing the virus is because the fibers within it are charged, right? Like your medium. Do you know? So in the case of your experiment, you have the fibers or the beads that make the medium. They are charged, and also the ones that you are injecting, the particles, they are pre-charged. In the case of COVID, do you know what happens? Is like is the droplet particles pre-charged themselves, or is some charge being generated due to van der Waals interactions or something like this? I know it's not exactly your presentation here, but I thought it.
No, that's fabulous actually, because I would like to move forward to like some other cases, because this is like a system that we can address physics of transport of solids, no matter what they are in a porous medium. Again, no matter what that is. Yes. So a few things. Water droplets typically they're believed to have some negative charges. Where does that come from? It's a little bit debatable, but it seems to have some negative charges, water droplets. So now, to answer your question, we should think about the mechanism of adsorption. If these droplets are attaching to the porous medium matrix, then these forces between droplet and the porous medium matrix becomes important. That's one step. Further, if we want to see how these viruses attach to the porous medium matrix, I'm not quite sure if the COVID virus has any charges, but I know, and we have seen a lot of cartoons or even like real image of that it has some ligands or some functional groups at the surface of the whole virus. So that makes it, these kind of brushes in polymer science makes it also sticky to some extent. And so we have to consider other factors like steric interactions or even confinement on the polymer chains to have a better understanding of adsorption of coronavirus on the solid substrate or in like solid matrix. I think it's a bit more complicated, but it's a great point.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your presentation. I think we are in time to move on to our next speaker. And that will be Paola Ferraz. She has a PhD in applied mathematics from the University of Campinas in Brazil. And she worked on porous media flow problems in multiscale mixed methods and also in high performance computing. She's currently a researcher at the Brazilian Synchrotron Light Laboratory as part of the scientific computing group, working on inverse problems related to image reconstruction. So Paola, the floor is yours. Thank you welcome to our studio.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. So today my talk will be about speed ups for a new recursive parallel multiscale method for giant high contrast porous media flows. It was part of my PhD work. So just talking a little bit about me. As said before, I have a bachelor's in applied mathematics at the University of Campinas, and I continue there to my master's and PhD, where I work with coding numerical methods to solve very large linear systems come from discretizations from porous media problems. I work a little bit with multigrid preconditioners, and in a high-performance computing setting, I work in parallel multiscale methods that I'm going to work here. I just finished my postdoc in applications of the recursive method, And currently, I'd say I'm working in image reconstruction problems for beamlines in a high-performance computing setting in the scientific computing group at the National Center for Research in Energy and Materials here at the Synchrotron Laboratory series here. It's been very nice. The whole motivation for my research until now was to find efficient and accurate numerical methods for the decipher problem. Okay, where we have a high contrast and continuous coefficients. So when we think about realistic problems, we have giant reservoirs, and when we discretize these equations for these giant reservoirs, to actually resolve very well them, we need billions and billions of cells, which is very computationally expensive. The discretizations of these problems, we have very large linear systems. And how to solve them, how to capture fine scale effects with the coarse modeling in order to have less computational cost and still solve the problems efficiently. Well, with this, we turn to the multiscale method, mixed multiscale method MuMM, that was introduced in 2014 by Dr. Pereira and collaborators. It's a method that decomposes our domain, our reservoir, into subdomains, where in each subdomains we solve local boundary problems. And then to connect each subdomain, we connect them through some kind of variable. Usually can be pressure, it could be flux, but here in the MuMM method we use the Robin boundary condition as a combination of both fluxes and pressures. So the solution of this whole problem is a simple linear combination of these local problems that we're going to solve and there are variables to connect each subdomain. The multiscale part of this method is that in the interfaces of each subdomains, we are going to set an intermediate quartz scale. We kind of partition these interfaces, and each of these partitions we put a constant per parse spaces there where our interface variable, our Robin variable will live. So the both of the how can you solve it? We solve the local boundary problems and the Robin variable problems. The local boundary problems I'm going to talk a little bit soon, but the Robin variable problems is where I'm really focused on my PhD thesis. And to solve them, we create a linear, usually we get all the Robin variables for all subdomains and create a global linear system that is usually very large, and we solve it and use parallel methods to solve this global interface problem. My idea was to do some algebraic manipulations in order to decompose this global problem into small localized linear systems, so we can use the parallel methods better and get a faster computation. Well, the local problems, they are basically two types of problems. We get a homogeneous solution and a particular solution. The solutions are problems similar to the original problem, but they are localized into each subdomain. In the homogeneous solutions, we don't get any boundary values or source terms, and the interface Robin variable conditions. We put all of them to 0 except to 1, where we put 1, and we solve this. So basically, we get a set of whether we call multiscale basis functions. And the quantity that we get is the same quantity of partitions of each part of the interface of our subdomain. The particular solution is a solution where all Robin boundary conditions are 0, and we consider the boundary source terms original. So the idea is to get these multiscale basis solutions, construct the global linear system, and to decompose it. How we are going to compose it? We are going to apply recursively a two-subdomain decomposition of the MuMM method. How are you going to do that? Basically, the two-domain decomposition of the MuMM method is we get our subdomain, you're going to decompose it in only two subdomains. Okay, so we get for each subdomain the multiscale basis functions. With them, we construct the matrix of the linear system, solve the linear system, get the Robbie variables, and then do the linear combination. Now, for the recursive formulation, what you're going to do? You're going to start with the two domains decomposition, and for each subdomain, for each multiscale basis function that you have to compute, you're going to apply again to solve it the MuMM method. Okay. So for each subdomain, you're going to decompose again into two, solve the multiscale basis functions, solve the linear system. For each multiscale basis function, we again are going to apply the method decomposes until we get a final decomposition. The idea here is to create a hierarchy of domain decompositions where each requires to find where each level we have a set of multiscale basis functions to compute and a set of linear systems to compute to obtain our Robin boundaries. The idea to implement is to start with a fine domain decompositions and to cluster each two subdomains together until we get the whole systems. So how the solution will be obtained like this? Again, we can get linear combinations similar to the original, where we get the same multiscale basis functions originally. We can nest all of them together and obtain a linear system like that, but with different coefficients for this linear system. These coefficients are not the Robin coefficients original, but they are nested linear combinations of the Robin solutions of the linear systems in all of the levels. So we only need to store the Robin variables and compute the multiscale basis functions. Well, with these manipulations, we get now very computational challenge because we want to parallelize this. So first, how we can map the process on each level. So we start with the fine domain decompositions where each processor gets a subdomain, gets associated to a subdomain to solve the local problems. But the method is a hierarchy of domain decompositions that we have to find the linear systems and how we can map this process on each level. And also, since we decompose our global linear systems, we want to solve this linear system simultaneously to gain computational time. So how we can do that and how we can map everything on each level, map the Robin variables on each level, map the process, and obtain the nested linear combinations of the Robin variables to obtain our solution. And also what information we need to exchange on each level to obtain what we want. Well, our objective was to keep everything as simple as possible. We don't want any idle processors. Every processor is working at the same time. No broadcasting. We don't want to use any high-level MPI functions, any of these. And since we have many levels on this code, we want to keep the same number of MPI exchanges to avoid the maximum cost of this exchange. And the final objective is to obtain a scalable code, very code that can solve a lot of problems very large, and maintain good scalability. Well, the solution of this was basically to do exchange, MPI exchange, to communicate process MPI exchange for processors 2 by 2. For example, on the first level where we have our first linear combination, where we're going to obtain our multiscale basis functions, we have one processor associated for each subdomain. So we communicate 2 by 2 when we cluster two of them together. In the next levels, we have subdomain clusters, but powered by processors associated with them on the power by 2, since we cluster 2 by 2 subdomains. So we can still exchange on each level 2 by 2 processors. So we associate one processor to the next associated one in the other subdomain. Okay. Also, what we can exchange here. We discovered that we don't need to exchange information from the whole volume of the subdomain. We only need the values of the interfaces, because, well, our linear system is the Robin variables that are only on the interface. Also, we don't need the whole fine information on the interfaces. Only need the average of these values associated with the coarse scale, the h-bar scale that's associated with the Robin variable on the interface. So with this, we can maintain a constant number of MPI exchanges on each level, and we can exchange very little information. So these exchanges of information on the MPI level can be very fast. Well, here is the scalability curves for the recursive MuMM method. I coded it in a 3D volume for 1 billion of cells bits. Here, this is curve of the time by the number of cores, the number of processors. So the red curve here is the ideal curve. The blue curve is our results, and this is the stroke scaling. Basically, we fix the number of cells in our volume, and then we grow up the number of processors that we grow. All is the same as to say that we are going to grow up the number of subdomains and compositions. So here we have 2024 processors, and we can see here the blue curve is very good accordance with the red curve, and it goes up. So this shows that it has a very good scaling. That means that our time to solve the one problem, we fix the number of elements and number of subdomains. If we divide into the time that we have to solve it, it's divided by 2. So it's very good. And this is for homogeneous permeability in this case. The next one is a heterogeneous permeability for the same type of problem, and we have a permeability rate of 10 to the plus 8 for a billions of cells. And again, we see a very good accordance for the red curve, the reference curve. And here is a weak scaling experiment that we did. Basically, we fix now the number of cells into a subdomain, not the domain wholly. And basically, we start to copy the subdomains. Okay, so the number of total cells in the domain are going up. So basically, if we have a time to solve it in a subdomain, like basically we want doesn't matter how many subdomains we have. We need to have the same time, the same computational time, because we fix the number of subdomains. So, and we go up in the number of cores. So here you can see the tables that basically the important part here is the MPI time, is the time for the MPI exchange for a growing number of cores, and you can see that is very low. So basically the whole scaling of the problem is completely determined by the number of the time of the computation of the multiscale basis functions that are completely local problems that are completely done inside each subdomain. So we don't have any interference of the MPI time. So this is the weak scaling. And here finally some applications that I did in my postdoc of the multiscale, the recursive multiscale method. We are going to extend these techniques for linear and nonlinear parabolic equations, and also modeling transport of karstic reservoir in a 3D settings. Here is this is a 2D cut of a 3D reservoir. We have a karstic here. You can see streamlines going to it. So that's it. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, Paola, for this great presentation. I'd like to mention that everyone who wants to ask a question or suggest any comment, please type it in the comment section. In the meantime, as a starter, I want to ask two questions. The first one is that in the mixed multiscale method, when we want to introduce a finer domain inside the coarser domain in time and in scale, how challenging is it? Is it something that can be introduced and implemented easily, or it's a bit challenging if you want to mix fine and coarse coarse domains across space and across time during the process? Is it?
It's a bit a challenge, yes, because it's a quite complex code, and basically here I only did for the elliptic problem, certo? Now we want to extend this for transport problems, and the thing is, we need to compute multiscale basis functions. That's the basis of everything, and it's very expensive to compute because we need to go to the final cells. We still decompose it into smaller problems inside the subdomains, okay, but we have to compute a lot of them. The good thing is the quantity of the multiscale basis functions that we need is the same quantity of partitions on the interface. Okay, but if the interface is too large, is the scale on the interface too large, you have two less basis functions. We lost a lot of information there. So we need to put get more courses, refine the course scale on the interface, so we have more multiscale basis functions to compute, and the code gets more computational expensive. The thing is, we need to balance the course scale, the quantity of the course scale, with the multiscale basis functions to compute. So this is a little bit challenging, especially when we go to the parabolic problems. We have to do this every time, and every step we need to recompute the multiscale basis functions. It's a very expensive process. So yeah.
I see. And in terms of computational resources, is it CPU intensive or is it RAM intensive? And does it help if we run the code using GPU, for example?
Yes, I didn't went to the GPU. The idea was to stay right now in MPI just to do the exchange, but the code would be very good to put some GPUs, but I didn't use any GPUs. I think it would make the code very faster, probably, because we get the GPU in each subdomains, and we probably would gain a lot to compute the multiscale basis functions with them. But I didn't use still GPU now.
I see. Okay, I see no comments in the comment section. So if nobody from the studio has a question, I think we can wrap up the session. Thank you once again, Navid and Paola, for your time and for this excellent presentation. I did really enjoy them. We wish you good luck with your future work and with your career. For our next session in 2 weeks, we are hosting Arne Jakub from the University of Mainz in Germany, and he will give a talk about digital rock physics applied to porous reservoir rocks by utilizing high-resolution imaging methods. And the second talk would be given by Ryan Payton from the Royal Holloway University of London on the porous scale assessment of subsurface carbon storage potential. With that, I would like to wrap up the session. I want to thank you again, our audience, for your support, comments, and suggestions. Please help us improve this platform for PhDs and young researchers, and by contacting us at porosmediattt@gmail.com, and you can subscribe to our mailing list by sending an email to this address. As Kamal mentioned, it's me, yeah. We did a bit of restructuring in the Porous Media Tea Time Talks team. Now we are happy to have Ariane, Nora, and Javier with us as part of the organizing committee. And now we are 8 organizers from 6 different institutes. And with that, I would like to say goodbye and hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.